Allah desires to keep impurity away from you, O Ahl-e-Bait, this act is only for Ahl-e-Bait alayhim as-salam. And when it is saying this over here, everything before it becomes irrelevant. Why? Because this innama is symbolizing that there is a new section within this verse. You know, everything before innama is conditional. And it's conditional in the form that it says, in it taqaytunna, that, O wives of the Prophet, if you are pious, do A, B, C, D, E, do all of these different things. But after innama, it is saying that Allah will definitively keep impurities away. So in the first portion, there is a condition. And in the second portion, Allah is saying definitely. So this shows there are two different groups which are being addressed. But over here, there's one more important question. That is there anyone in the Muslim Ummah who practically says that the wives of Rasulullah are ma'soom? If you are saying that Ayatul Tathir is about the wives of Rasulullah, show me a Muslim who says that the wives of Rasulullah are infallible and ma'soom. No, the Muslims have examples in history that when one of the wives of Rasulullah stands against the caliph of that time, afterwards they say that she did tawbah. Tawbah symbolizes that a mistake was made. And then afterwards she does tawbah over there. So even here, all of the Muslims, they recognize that amongst the wives of Rasulullah, there are different statuses amongst the wives of Rasulullah. You know, there is a hadith in Bukhari, and this hadith on sunnah.com is a hadith number 7424. 7424. And in Bukhari, it comes in Kitab al-Tawheed, and it's narrated from Aisha, the wife of the Prophet, that ma ghirtu ala imra'atin ma ghirtu ala Khadija. That I was never jealous of a woman in the way that I was jealous about Khadija. Why? وَلَقَدْ أَمَرَهُ رَبُّهُ, because Allah commanded the Prophet أَن يُبَشِّرَهَا بِبَيْتٍ فِي الْجَنَّةِ, that Allah had commanded the Prophet that give her glad tidings that she will have a house in paradise. When this wife of Rasulullah over here is saying that I am jealous that Allah gave a status to Khadija, what this goes to show is that the wives of Rasulullah are in different levels, because there is a status that was given to one wife which was not necessarily given towards others. And in this regard, when this ayat in its context, it is saying that, O wives of the Prophet, stay within your homes, do all of these different things. If you are going to make the claim that Ayatul Tathir is about the wives of Rasulullah, then historically they should have stayed within their homes. And historically, all of them should have followed all of these different commands. But you find even the Muslim Ummah acknowledges that this is something which didn't always happen. So you find this fine point is found within the word innama. But over here, the next question that we ask is that then why is it that they say this verse is about the wives or includes the wives? You know, the reason they say that is because in this verse they say that the irada of Allah is tashri'i, not taqweeni. And I'll simplify what that means. You know what that means? It's one thing that we say it is the order of Allah for mankind to die. When we say it is the will of Allah for man to die, is there anyone who can oppose that will? No, there is no one that can oppose that will. There is one type of will that no one can oppose. That will is taqweeni, it's in creation. It is that will about which the Quran, chapter 36, verse 82, Surah Yasin, it says, إِنَّمَا أَمْرُهُ إِذَا أَرَادَ شَيْئًا أَن يَقُولَ لَهُ كُن فَيَكُونَ. That when Allah wills a matter, He says to it be, and it becomes. But then there is another type of will. Another type of will is that Allah wills for you to pray. And Allah wills for you to be a good person. This type of will, Allah has given us the free will to oppose it. Yes, if we oppose it, there will be consequences. But at the same time, this type of will is a will in legislation. So those individuals from outside of the school of Ahl-e-Bait, they say that this ayat is no fadila for Ahl-e-Bait. Why? Because the will in this ayat is of the second type. That in other words, what Allah is saying is that, O Ahl-e-Bait, Allah wants you to be pure. And Allah wants you to act in this manner because you are Ahl-e-Bait. Allah did not keep impurities away from you. Now, what is the issue with this? The issue with this is that, is this command restricted just to Ahlul Bayt, or is this command for everyone? When you look in the Quran, it demonstrates that Allah wants all of mankind to be pure. If we are saying that this is a legislative command, that this command, Allah is saying that, O Ahlul Bayt, I want you to be pure, to stay away from sins. If you take that opinion, the word innama puts you in a big problem. And it puts you in a big problem in the sense, then that means the act of being pure and staying away from sin is only for Ahlul Bayt and no one else. Because the word innama is restricting the act of rizq coming towards them. So you find in this manner, when Allah, He says that innama yuridullah liyudhib ankum rizqa Ahlul Bayt wa yutahhirakum tathira. Allah, He says that we have kept impurities away from you, O Ahlul Bayt. This is a command in creation. This is a command that cannot be opposed in that sense. And in this regard, the next question that comes up, if we have established that the context of this portion is different from the portion that precedes it, and if we have established that Allah is keeping impurities away from them, the key question then comes up is that who is Ahlul Bayt within this ayah? And in this regard, we find that there are a number of different opinions in the Muslim Ummah. For example, one group said that it is for 5 individuals in the time of Rasulullah, Amir al-Mu'mineen, Fatima al-Zahra, Imam al-Hasan, and Imam al-Hussein alayhim as-salam.
Allahumma salli ala.
Then a second group came forth. They said it is for these 5 and the wives of Rasulullah. A third group came forth and said it is only for the wives of Rasulullah. A fourth group came forth and it said it is for Ahlul Bayt in the general sense. You say, what do you mean Ahlul Bayt in the general sense? There is a hadith which is found in Sahih Muslim that Zayd ibn Arqam, he says, O Rasulullah, are the wives considered part of your Ahlul Bayt? Rasulullah says, no, they are not, because a wife can be divorced. She comes in the house and she can leave the house. But Ahlul Bayt are those upon whom sadaqah is haram. So in Sahih Muslim, Zayd ibn Arqam, he says, who are these Ahlul Bayt? They say these Ahlul Bayt are the children, the Al of Ali, and the children of Ja'far, and the children of Aqil, and the children of Abbas, the uncle of the Prophet. So you find some said it meant Ahlul Bayt in the general sense. Now, amongst all of these different opinions, the question is that what evidence do we have that it is for 5 individuals, and what evidence have different groups brought forth for their own viewpoint? You know, when it comes to the first opinion, that this ayat in that time was for Amir al-Mu'mineen, Fatima al-Zahra, Imam al-Hasan, Imam al-Hussein, Rasulullah. You find in this regard, when we look at the works of narrations amongst the Muslims, whether it is Sahih al-Muslim, whether it is the book of At-Tirmidhi, whether it is the book of An-Nasai, whether it is the Musnad of Ahmad ibn Hanbal, whether it is the Musnad of Ibn Barraz, whether it is the Mustadrak of Hakim, all of them, they mention one narration. And they mention a narration that Rasulullah was there with 4 other individuals. You know, one of those narrations is found in Sahih Muslim. In Sahih Muslim, in the Kitab of the Fadail of the Sahaba, the book about the virtues of the companions, in the section which is titled Babu Fadaili Ahl-e-Bait al-Nabi, the chapter of the virtues of the Ahl-e-Bait of Rasulullah, on sunnah.com, hadith number 2424, over there it is stated that Aisha narrates. And the exact words of the narration are this. خَرَجَ النَّبِيُّ صَلَّى اللَّهُ وَسَلَّمَ عَلَى حَدِّ تَعْبِيرِهِمْ. Their expression. That the Prophet, he comes out غَدَاتًا in the morning. In the morning time, Rasulullah, he comes out. وَعَلَيْهِ مِرْطٌ مُرَاحَلٌ مِنْ شَعْرٍ أَسْوَدٍ. He had with him a striped cloak which was made of black camel hair. After that it says, فَجَاءَ الْحَسَنِ بْنُ عَلِيٍّ فَأَدْخَلَهُ. At that moment, Hassan comes, the Rasulullah takes Imam and Hassan underneath the cloak. ثُمَّ جَاءَ الْحُسَيْنِ فَدَخَلَ مَعَهُ. After that, Imam and Hussein comes, Rasulullah takes him underneath the cloak. ثُمَّ جَاءَتْ فَاطِمَةَ فَأَدْخَلَهَا. After that, Fatima to Zahra comes, Rasulullah brings her underneath the cloak. ثُمَّ جَاءَ عَلِيٌّ فَأَدْخَلَهُ. Then Amir al-Mu'mineen comes, he brings him underneath the cloak. And then after that, Rasulullah says, ثُمَّ قَالْ إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمْ رِجْسَ أَهْلِ الْبَيْتِ وَيُطَهِّرَكُمْ تَطْهِيرًا. That Allah wills to keep all impurities away from you, O Ahl-e-Bait. This narration in Sahih Muslim. It's mentioning over here that 5 individuals came, Rasulullah puts the cloak upon them, and then after that he recites this ayat of the Quran. You know, when we look at this narration, we find that there are at least 12 different companions who have narrated this incident from Rasulullah. For example, Aisha narrates this from Rasulullah. Salama narrates this from Rasulullah. Ibn Abbas narrates this from Rasulullah. Abu Darda narrates this from Rasulullah. Anas ibn Malik, Jabir ibn Abdullah al-Ansari. In this manner, you find that there are at least 12 different companions who narrate this incident from Rasulullah. You know, on top of that, the next question that comes up then is that if we have all of these narrations found in all of these different books, and we have all of these different companions saying that it was 5 individuals, how do we know that it was only about these 5 and not Ahlul-Bayt in the wider sense? I said one of the opinions is that there are certain Muslims who said that when Ayatul Tathir came, it referred to the children of Ali, the children of Ja'far, the children of Aqil, and the children of Abbas. The reason we know this is that in many narrations, when Rasulullah, he gathers those 5 underneath the cloak, he says, Allahumma ha'ulai ahlu bayti. That, oh Allah, these are my Ahlul Bayt. You know, if we didn't understand this fact, there are many individuals who could have said, Rasulullah, this is obvious, these are your Ahlul Bayt. But when Rasulullah, he says this, Rasulullah is emphasizing this point, meaning he was aware that there will be individuals who dispute whom this Ahlul Bayt are. And when he was aware of this, he says, Allahumma ha'ulai Ahlul Bayti, that if I have Ahlul Bayt, it is referring towards these individuals. So now we see that these 5 and not anyone else. But over here, the question that still remains is that there's a large group of Muslims that say that when you look at this ayat, right, it shifts from the feminine to the masculine. In Arabic, in the plural, when you have males and females, you'll use the masculine. So the question is that why can it not just be Ahlul Bayt and the wives of Rasulullah? You know, aside from the points that I mentioned at the beginning of the lecture, when you look at the source of this opinion, you find that the source of this opinion is one individual. And that individual, his name was what? His name was Ibn Muzahim. This individual, by the name of Ibn Muzahim, he is the only person that traces this opinion of it being about Ahlul Bayt and the wives of Rasulullah. You know, this person, Ibn al-Jawzi, who has a very famous tafsir, and within that tafsir, he says what? he says that this individual said that this portion of the verse is for the wives of Rasulullah and the Ahl-e-Bait. But you know, the same individual, Ibn al-Jawzi, he writes a book about those who were weak narrators from Rasulullah. And when he wrote that book called Kitab al-Du'afa, he mentions Ibn Muzahim as a weak narrator. That on one side, when you want to lower Ahlul Bayt, you take the opinion of that individual. But when you want to be academic and you want to be critical, you say that this individual is an individual who is weak, that we cannot rely upon him when it comes to narrating from Rasulullah. So you find that it comes to one individual. But when you look at the final opinion, which says that it is only for the wives of Rasulullah and no one else, you find that the issue becomes even more problematic. Why? Because once again, that opinion, it goes to one person. And that person is Ikrama, the servant of Ibn Abbas. You know who this Ikrama was? Al-Dhahabi, who was a very famous scholar, he says about Ikrama, Kana ta'inan fil Islam. That this individual, he would criticize, he would attack Islam. And then he says that one day, it's mentioned in his biography, that he was at the door, he was at the entrance of Masjid al-Nabawi. And as he's looking inside the mosque, he says, Ma fihi illa kafir, that there is no one within this mosque except for a person who is a kafir. When you look at all of the narrations that say that this opinion, that Ayatul Tathir is only for the wives and not the immediate family of Rasulullah, all of them, they go back to Ikrama. You know, it's mentioned by Ibn Kathir that this Ikrama, he would be in the marketplace, and as he's in the marketplace, he would yell that Ayatul Tathir is only for the wives of Rasulullah. And you know, Ibn Kathir, he actually quotes his exact words. You know what he would say? He would say, Man sha'a, that whoever wants, bahaltuhu, annaha nazalat fi nisa'in nabi. He says, whoever wants, I will engage in a mubahala with them, that this verse was revealed only about the wives of Rasulullah. In other words, he is saying that if I am wrong about this, then may the curse of Allah be upon me. But you find this individual, when you look at his biography, as I quoted earlier, this individual was a questionable individual. And to the extent you find that he was one of the Khawarij. You know, certain individuals, when they want to defend this man, the argument they give is that he is quoted from in Bukhari. You know, when you look at Sahih al-Bukhari, there are a number of Khawarij that Imam al-Bukhari, he narrates from. When it comes to Imam Zainul Abidin, when it comes to Imam al-Baqir, when it comes to Imam al-Sadiq, you find that there are narrations which may be lacking. But when it comes to certain Khawarij, there are narrations in the plenty. You know, one of those individuals that Bukhari, he narrates from, is an individual by the name of Imran ibn al-Hittan. Imran ibn al-Hittan was an individual who has a line of poetry. Now you may say that this line of poetry, is it in the praise of Rasulullah? Is it in the praise of the religion? No, this line of poetry is in the praise of Ibn Muljam. When he writes this line of poetry in the praise of Ibn Muljam, he says over there, Ya darbatu min taqiyin, ma arada biha illa liyabluga min dil arshi ridwana. That strike that Ibn Muljam he did was the strike of a pious individual who only wanted the pleasure of Allah. You find Bukhari is narrating from an individual like Imran ibn al-Hittan. So you find this argument that just because Bukhari narrates from Ikrama, it does not give precedence to Ikrama being an authentic narrator. And by the way, this discussion right now is an academic discussion. This discussion shouldn't prevent us from supporting others who are from different schools of thought. For example, when we look at the atrocities in Palestine and Gaza and different parts of the world, We shouldn't just think that, no, they do not believe in Ahl-e-Bait in the way that we believe in them, thus will not support them. This isn't something which is in the seerah of Ahl-e-Bait in that manner. But you find when it comes to the academic level, we need to establish what our belief system is. So you find in this manner, those individuals who would record opinions outside of this verse being about these 5 individuals, you find that they're questionable in their biographies. And they don't compare to the great companions of Rasulullah who would narrate that this ayat is about 5 individuals. But when you look at this verse, you find that one more point within this verse is that Allah He is saying that rijs and impurity has been kept away from Ahlul Bayt. You know, when you look at the Arabic wording it says, لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمُ الرِّجْسَ. There is a difference between لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمْ and لِيُذْهِبَ مِنْكُمْ. You know, the word min, amongst its meanings, is for something to be a part of something. حُسَيْنٌ مِنِّي وَأَنَا مِنَ الْحُسَيْنِ. That Hussein is a part of me and I am from Hussein. When this ayat, it uses the particle an and not min, it is showing that the rijs was never a part of Ahlul Bayt. But rather, rijs was always kept away from Muhammad and Ali Muhammad. That's why I say to those individuals who translated the Quran, whether it is Piqtal or Shakir or anyone else, that why is it that you say that remove impurities from Ahlul Bayt? But rather the reality of the translation is that Allah has kept impurities away from Ahlul Bayt. So you find in this regard, this point is seen within the ayah. But the final question to ask is that what is a rijs? You know, the word rijs is mentioned in 9 different places in the Quran. One of those places where it's mentioned is chapter 50, verse 9. And this chapter, this verse, it gives us an insight into rijs. Because the rijs is anything which is detestable by Allah. Anything which is sin. Anything which Allah dislikes, it comes under the category of rijs. Allah within chapter 50, verse 9, He says, Ya ayyuhalladina amanu. That, O you who believe, إنما الخمر والميسر والأنساب والأزلام رجس من عمل الشيطان. That, O you who believe, wine, gambling, idolatry, playing the game of lots, which was something that would be done at that time, all of them are impurities. The Quran is showing that there are many different categories going on in this ayah: the drinking, gambling, idolatry. All of these different things, they come under the category of rijs. But you find on top of that, there's another verse of the Quran. Chapter 6, verse 125. Within that verse, Allah He says, فَمَنْ يُرِدُ اللَّهُ أَنْ يَهْدِيَهُ يَشْرَحْ صَدْرَهُ لِلْإِسْلَامِ. That whomsoever Allah wants to guide, He expands their breast, He opens their capacity to accept the truth of Islam. وَمَنْ يُرِدْ أَنْ يُضِلَّهُ يَجْعَلْ صَدْرَهُ ضَيِّقًا حَرَجًا كَأَنَّمَا يَصَعَّدُ فِي السَّمَاءِ. And the one whom Allah wants to misguide, Allah constricts the breast of that individual as if he is going through the sky in that manner. It is constricting. But then after that, the ayat that continues, it says, كَذَلِكَ يَجْعَلُ اللَّهُ الرِّجْسَ عَلَى الَّذِينَ لَا يُؤْمِنُونَ. That Allah, He makes impurity, He brings a rijs upon those who are not believers. In other words, the rijs is seen as one of those things which is away from Iman. And those individuals that Allah has kept away from rijs, you find only they will be at the highest level of faith and belief. It is only a person who has been kept away from a rijs by Allah who can say, لَوْ كُشَفَ لَهُمُ الْغِثَاءَ مَا أَزْدَدْتُ يَقِينًا. That if the veils are removed from my eyes, it wouldn't increase my certainty in the way that Amir al-Mu'mineen mentioned. So you find all of these different points, they come from this ayat of the Quran. They come from understanding the context of verses. And this is something that we see that Ahlul Bayt would do as well. You know, one of the things that Yazid did within his courtroom, is that Yazid would use verses of the Quran out of context to show that he was an authority and Ahl-e-Bait were in disfavor from Allah. You know, one of the verses that Yazid he mentions is he quotes the verse of the Quran, وَمَا أَصَابَكُم مِّن مُصِيبَةٍ فَبِمَا كَسَبَتْ أَيْدِيكُم. He looks at Imam Zainul Abidin and he says that there is no musibah or trial that comes upon man except that they earned it. Imam Zainul Abidin, he looks at Yazid and he says, this ayat wasn't about us Ahlul Bayt. Because this ayat is about those who are oppressors. This verse isn't about the oppressed. The verse which is about the oppressed is the verse that says, مَا أَصَابَ مُصِيبَةٌ فِي الْأَرْضِ وَلَا فِي أَنفُسِكُمْ إِلَّا فِي كِتَابٍ مِّن قَبْلِ أَن نَّبْرَأَهَا. That there is no musibah except that it is in the book which Allah will bring out from that book. Inna dhalika alallahi yasir, and indeed that is easy for Allah. So mankind, do not be sorrowful about what you lost and do not be happy about what you gain at an excessive level. You find the Imam over there, when he quotes this ayat in front of Yazid, he is showing, oh Yazid, you need to understand the context of an ayat. You cannot use a verse of the Quran and turn it against us. You know, in other words, those individuals that follow and they try to use the Quran to lower the position of Muhammad and Ali Muhammad, these are the same tactics that Yazid ibn Muawiyah used. And you find that they're following within those same footsteps. But one of the most famous incidents where the Imam, he mentions the Quran, and in reality he mentions Ayatul Tathir, is when they were within the marketplace in Sham. You know, when they were in that marketplace in Sham, it stated that an elderly individual, he comes to Imam Zainul Abidin, and he says that, may Allah curse you. Imam Zainul Abidin says, oh man, have you ever read the Quran? The man says, yes, I've read the Quran. The Imam says, هَلْ قَرَأْتَ الْآيَةَ, that have you read the verse, قُلْ لَا أَسْأَلُكُمْ عَلَيْهِ أَجْرًا إِلَّا الْمَوَدَّةَ فِي الْقُرْبَةِ. That have you read the verse of the Quran that I ask for nothing except love for my progeny? The man says, Na'am, yes. The Imam says, we are that qurba. Then after that, the Imam recites another verse of the Quran, وَآتِ ذَا الْقُرْبَ حَقَّهُ, that give the right towards the kinfolk. The man, he says, I've read this ayah. The Imam says, we are that qurba, that family. Then the Imam, he recites the verse of the Quran that give 1/5 towards Allah and His messengers and that qurba. The Imam says, we are that family. But this ayat which we analyze tonight, then the Imam, he recites this ayat and he says, oh man, have you read the verse of the Quran? إِنَّمَا يُرِيدُ اللَّهُ لِيُذْهِبَ عَنْكُمْ رِجْسَ أَهْلِ الْبَيْتِ. The man says, yes, I have read that verse. The Imam says that we are that Ahlul Bayt. That what day had come upon the family of Rasulullah, that people, they would come, they would throw stones on the family of Rasulullah in the marketplace of Sham. And one individual would come and he would pour boiling water on Imam Zainul Abidin. And the turban of Imam Zainul Abidin would catch on fire at that moment. You know, after this musibah, Ahlul Bayt, they enter